talking about these last few similarities between Tsukamoto and Onoda really kind of makes sense when you add in additional characters. So, you know, the main similarity that the two of them have is their introduction to the sport comes from, an athlete who is deep into the sport. And so they're, the same year in high school as them. So they are, first years as well. But they are really considered to be kind of phenomenal at their sport. And so, you have that, you have that contrast of the beginner and the veteran. And so, for Yowamushi Pedal, that introduction, of course, is Imaizumi. And so, Imaizumi is the serious first year. He is used to, he was used to winning. He was used to being the best. He has a very high work ethic. He, is serious about his training. He cycles every day. He does, everything that he's supposed to do. And, he comes into his first year with this kind of dark cloud hanging over his head. And of course, that cloud comes in the form of another athlete who kind of did a dirty trick to beat him in a race. But that's, that's for another video, as in the actual review of Yowamushi Pedal. In this, I just want to really kind of encapsulate, the idea of the newbie coming into a sport due to the relationship with someone else. So right, with Imaizumi, you have that seriousness. He's kind of an island unto himself. He's kind of used to being an island unto himself. He's not really there to make friends. He's just there to kind of do his job. And, he wants to get back to being the winner that he's used to being. And that's just kind of the way that it is. And, he has an encounter with Onoda that really kind of makes him take note of this kid that normally he would not pay attention to. And, of course, if you have seen the show, you know what I'm talking about. If you've not seen the show or if you've not read the manga, it's, really kind of simple. At their school, they have, their school is kind of on a hill. And so they have two different ways into the school. One is sort of a gentle slope. The other is a sharp incline. And, they kind of meet each other on that sharp incline. Onoda on a bike that is not equipped at all to handle that kind of, decline, and Imaizumi on his road racer. And so, just the way that Onoda rode down the hill, that he had no fear, and that at one point, he came across him singing as he was climbing the hill, just kind of, put him on Imaizumi's radar. And then from there, Imaizumi, comes to him and really kind of wants to see up close what his skills are. And so he invites him to a race. They race because, Imaizumi pretty much says that, if you beat me, then I will join your club. Because as we know, the original intent for Onoda was to restart the anime club. So Imaizumi kind of reels him in with that kind of talk that we are going to, that I'll help you restart the club if you beat me in the race. And that kind of is the opening that puts Onoda on that path of getting himself into a place where he ends up joining the cycling club. Our other kind of phenom in Days is Kazuma. Kazuma is, was recruited to the school because he is considered a phenom in soccer. And so he was brought in to really sort of add to the team, which is a powerhouse school, and to help them get back to, going to nationals or going to, the inter high and becoming champs and things like that. And, similar to Imaizumi, he has this cloud kind of hanging over his head. He takes the sport seriously. There's a part of him that, does love the sport, slightly different than Imaizumi in that, for Kazuma, his, dark cloud kind of made playing soccer a bit of a chore for him. And so he's doing it, but, he somewhere along the line, he just kind of lost his love of it. And, in that loss, you're playing the sport, but you're not really feeling the sport the same way. And so, much like, Onoda and Maizumi, there's something about Tsukamoto that just really kind of makes him latch onto the kid, invite him to come, play soccer with him. I mentioned in the one review, there's a difference in how they meet in the manga versus the anime, but essentially, them connecting over, playing a kind of pickup soccer game really kind of remains the same. And, them kind of, being in the same class in the same year and, Tsukamoto wanting to join the soccer team really doesn't change anything. And, that happening because he really had fun playing with Kazuma in soccer. So that is, really kind of the, like that main subtle point of them being introduced and, being introduced to the sport by other characters. So when it comes to a huge similarity that Onoda and Tsukamoto bring to the table, it is that they are atmosphere changers. And so what I mean with that is there is this kind of pressure that comes along with them, when they're playing in their sport and they're serious about it, they bring this sort of change with them. And a lot of times that change, is good for their teammates. So, let's talk about Onoda briefly. It's always mentioned that he is at his most dangerous when he's smiling. And so, because he is a climber, if he's riding his bike up a mountain and he starts to smile, and he has a very bright, happy smile, it usually means that you're in trouble because, he's about to, he's basically about to beat you. Not that he's intending it, because it's a matter of the pressure that Onoda brings is one that isn't really competitive. He loves to climb mountains. He loves to ride with friends. He basically, applies pressure just by virtue of the fact that if you thought that you left him behind, if you thought that you left him behind, inevitably he will catch up. And, as with the first arc of his first year, the whole thing is wanting his team to win. And so, he essentially, if you give him a job, he will do the job. And so, because he kept doing incredible things and bringing and shifting the atmosphere, every time, his teammates felt down, every time they felt like they were under pressure, every time they felt like things weren't going right, there was Onoda, coming along and just immediately shifting and changing the atmosphere. Tsukamoto is quite similar in that way. So Tsukamoto is quite similar in that way, where he comes on and the atmosphere sort of changes. And like with Onoda, it lightens because, Tsukamoto's a small kid. He's kind of a clumsy kid. He's a very serious kid, but, at his seriousness and his clumsiness, and kind of shenanigans ensue that he doesn't really mean to bring, but it allows the atmosphere to shift for the better. And it's for that reason that he manages to end up on the main roster even as a beginner. Because the same thing happens with Onoda, where Onoda as a beginner, you end up on the regular team. And you end up on the regular team simply because you can change the atmosphere. You can bring about a different sort of change. And, with Tsukamoto, that really, it really is highlighted a lot in Days that, just when the team is down, like just when they think that either they're going to lose or, when they're, they think that they're going to have to go into extra time or anything like that, here comes Tsukamoto. It's not over yet. And, he's pushing them, to get it together without even trying to do it in a way that is intense and competitive. And so, you have them changing the atmosphere, especially for their teammates, and lightening the mood and, kind of reminding them that it's okay, we're going to be able to do this. Contrast that to the opponents who, he comes on, because it is always made mention because, for Onoda, because let's go back to Onoda, when they are at the Inter High and, Onoda got left behind and ended up in last place and had to pass 100 riders in order to get up to his team so that, they could even compete in the mountain portion of the Inter High. You have that kind of heavy pressure moment for his teammates, where, they're wondering if he's going to catch up, if it's going to be okay, if they're going to be able to do what they need to do. And then you have the, their opponents who, essentially think that they've got this in the bag and, it's fine. And they don't ever have to worry about anything because, they're going to win. And then Onoda shows up and it just kind of switches. His teammates get happy. They get lively, they're relaxed. It's now okay. They immediately put Onoda to work, and you have the opponents who now feel this kind of pressure because what they thought would happen didn't happen. It's really kind of classified in the anime where, on the last day, because the Inter High for the cycling lasts 3 days. And the last day, of course, is the most competitive because that is when only one person can win and only one person can win for the team. So, you have the moment where, their opponents, Hakugaku, they think that they've won. And the captain of the team, he thinks that they just have it in the bag and he's so happy. He's so excited, and he's just riding and he's just, kind of relaxed knowing that his teammate is going to cross the finish line and that the race is over as far as he's concerned. And then there's just this moment where it's like he just feels this intense pressure and his hands start to sweat and he's really feeling like, what is going on? And all that happened is that Onoda disappears, passes him, and, continues on. And, what the opponent thought would happen turns out not to be what happens, because then, Onoda wins the race. And so you really kind of have that. Days is similar for that because, for their opponents, when you think that you have it, when you think that you have the match in the bag, and it's the same thing. You think you have the match in the bag. You think that you have tired out, the main team. You think that, everything is going your way. And then all of a sudden you see Tsukamoto. And for a lot of the opponents, it's like you recognize that he changes the atmosphere, but you're not quite sure how it's going to shift things. And because that was always the thing, because after a while, the teams tried to get to a place where they tried to account for Tsukamoto and the way that he changed the atmosphere. But inevitably, he always did things in a way that they didn't quite expect. And so there kind of was this pressure that came with him being there because you didn't know what to do with him. You couldn't necessarily be as hard in your checks against him because he was so light that you were more likely to foul him than you were to actually get the ball from him. You couldn't account for the way that he made his teammates light up. And, just especially once Tsukamoto decided he wanted to start making goals of his own, and the way that he was trying to put his game together, it just, it made him have this sort of pressure that other teams didn't know how to deal with. And so, atmospheric change was just, it was like, I would say that these are probably the better parts of these stories, because it's the idea of you don't know what to do with someone who you think should just be a beginner and should just be easy to deal with. And all of a sudden, they really are not easy to deal with. And that is a huge similarity between Onoda and Onoda and Tsukamoto. The way that they changed the atmosphere, the way that they, kind of brought relief to their teammates when they came out, and the way that they kind of pressured their opponents without even understanding what they were doing, that it just was so natural, it's really kind of it's an interesting storytelling element, because applying it to real life, like we all know, when someone is incredibly talented and, like I go back to softball, the heavy hitter that comes up, and how you should be wary of that heavy hitter. And so like you can just feel this extra tension because that they hit hard, and that they, that if they hit it just right, that they could get very far, and you have to be like on edge. That kind of is the thing, that I'm talking about when it comes to the pressure that they applied. And of course, the last similarity, and, it goes back very much to, the way that story is told, is both of them really kind of have an incredible, growth journey over a relatively short period of time. For Onoda, it is over the course of the inter-high where, or I guess, because you can add the months, previous of, his training and whatnot, because he has to go from, just riding a regular sort of bike and, to riding a road racer, and, suddenly, having to learn how to take it more serious, and, learning techniques and things like that. And, learning to be competitive. So that kind of is his journey of learning to be competitive when he doesn't really want to be competitive. And so, for his, like I say, his is relatively short just because the inter-high lasted 3 days. So for him to go from complete and total beginner to having to grow over the course of 3 days, and, it was an intense having to grow because a lot of things went wrong for him those 3 days. So, it was an intense growing period for him. Now, of course, in the manga, things continue to go, and then he continues to have to grow because now you have the next level of, now you've won the inter-high. So now you have to learn how to operate when, the whole world now is kind of against you and, wants to take you down, and, and you're still not necessarily competitive, but, you're now having to deal with this new level of, of fame and competitiveness that you've never had to deal with before. Tsukamoto, because Days encounters just his first year. So his growth, we get over a matter of months. And, it's kind of, it's kind of similar to Onoda in that, you've never been competitive. You're having to learn how to be competitive, and then you're having to learn what it means now when people see you as competition. And so, there's also the aspect of him that is quite personal. It's, the fear of things like getting injured. It's the fear of, competing against his teammates. It's the, the overall fear of just, you're surrounded by these crowds and all eyes are on you. It's, the fear of change for the next year. It's, you have all these things kind of going on in the growth arc. So, you're not just getting a Tsukamoto goes from complete beginner, to learning how to score goals by the end of it. You're kind of getting, all the kind of neuroses that go along with learning what it means, to just become an athlete and not knowing if it's actually what you want to do, because it means actually growing and changing. And so, yeah, these are, these are the things, because I'm tying it back to why I really kind of like these kind of characters in sports manga. And, I think with Tsukamoto and, having finished the whole series of, days, it just like the intensity of his growth, everything that he kind of went through, the fear and whatnot that he had to kind of fight his way through, and the decision making that had to go along with it, for someone who's played sports, and I think for someone, like for people, if you haven't really played sports, but you're interested in playing sports, like I think there's a lot that people can actually learn from a character like this, because there's a lot of questions that, that kind of go into playing sports that are just kind of outside of what happens on the field. And, Days really goes into it. Yowamushi Pedal, they kind of go into it, but it's more about the competition and, Onoda kind of learning to come into his own, because it still is that coming into your own aspect that I think sometimes, and I think especially for Americans, I think sometimes we kind of take it for granted. This kind of really, like these series, like they really kind of made me want to sit back and actually appreciate what I went through, playing sports growing up, and, and just like question why I wanted to play sports, and just like, yeah, like decisions that were made. And, I think it just gets you kind of thinking. And I think that that's kind of the point of these series, and why I think that, like, for me, they are so important, because it is something to appreciate, especially if you are someone playing sports or interested in it, because I think it's something that a lot of people can find that they relate to, some of the aspects of what, characters like Tsukamoto and Onoda have gone through. So, yeah, it's, I think I would like to go deeper into, into the, like, the sports genre part of it, but I'm finding I probably have to go back and do some notes, so I won't do that here. But I will say, the similarities of these characters, and, part of why I'm doing the comparison, it really kind of goes to show from a storytelling point that you can take an archetype and you can really kind of, bring something really deep out of it, something that people can actually relate to and work with. And that's really kind of why, I like the nice character, especially in a sports genre, the nice beginner who is kind of shy and has never done it before and who just takes a chance and does it. Because to a degree, we all end up there at some point. It may not be in sports, but it could be in something else. And so, that relatability aspect really is what kind of stands out in the storytelling of creating this sort of character archetype. And so that will be it for the similarities portion of the video. The next one, of course, I will be going into the differences because, as an archetype, you do want to talk about the similarities because, if you are going to end up doing characters and things like that, knowing, some good parts of an archetype can really help you. But, getting into the differences can help you see how you can kind of expand that and create really kind of well-rounded characters. So that will be in part 3 of this series, and I will see you then. If you like this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, do the bell for notifications, share this, do all of that, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.